you couldn't hand off a lot of the animations that people were making to a developer because it would take like months and months of engineering work to make some of these animations. Or you can just use frame of motion with the layout prop and you can recreate these things.
Hello, welcome to devtools-fm. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and this is my co-host, Justin.
Hey everyone. We're really excited to have Matt Perry on with us. Matt, you're the creator of Pop Motion and Framer Motion, very critically important animation libraries, especially in the React scene. And you've got some news about Framer Motion, now Motion, and its new direction. So we're incredibly excited to talk to you about that. But before we dive in, could you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so that's basically the long and short of it. I've written way too many animation libraries at this point. And the latest one, the final one, is just called Motion. And it's a direct continuation of both, basically of all my previous work, Framer Motion, Motion One. It's all bundled into this one animation library now.
So let's roll it back way to the beginning because this story starts years and years ago. So let's just start with animation in general. What drew you into wanting to make animation libraries, and where were like the tools at the time falling short?
Yeah, so it was originally I was a designer and I moved more into development, like a kind of by accident, I suppose. Like really letting go of the design side it just sort of happened, I guess. And part of that was like, especially in the early days, like as you probably know, I'm sure there's younger listeners who might not even remember these times, but like Flash was the big thing, the browser plugin. And they really, at the time, it was the only way that you could actually achieve animations. And there were certainly certain things that weren't possible for a long time, like blur effects and things like that. And really playing with the timeline editor and GreenSock in the code editor, between those two things, like I just really fell in love with making those things. And I also felt like I had a lot of I don't know, I just really always wanted to push things to that next level. Like I always, when you grow up and you're watching films and you see the way UIs are in films, obviously I don't need them to be like too ridiculous, but they always seemed like they were like here and we were operating a bit down here. So even no matter what I was making, I always tried to throw in like a little sprinkle of something just to make it that little bit more engaging or polished. It wasn't always like, these days I'd say like to make your animations educational, like to help the user understand transition between states. Whereas back then, really, I was only interested in making things feel like, if you ever play a video game and it's really taking the time, like Persona or something like that, where the menus are just so slick that someone's cared a lot about that. That's sort of that's how I like. You can tell games where they haven't done that. And so that's sort of my feeling about it. It doesn't have to just be educational. It can also convey the feeling that someone's given a fuck about this interface. Like someone's really spent the time to make it pop.
Transitioning to make it pop into how Pop Motion came about. Actually, was Pop Motion your first animation library, or did you have an intent before that?
No, it was the first anime. I started with the name Redshift, which for obvious reasons, perhaps to anyone who's put their head into the world of AWS, it wasn't the greatest name, and it wasn't very Googleable, and yeah, so it was the same library. So I renamed it Pop Motion, and that really was my attempt to make a library where anything is possible. Like I wanted it to be really low level, and to its detriment, I think ultimately, like the people who loved it because they were the ones that like almost like the power users were attracted to it, but it didn't really gain any traction. And I think a lot of that was to do with its inherent unpleasantness in terms of like needing to understand certain functional programming paradigms or the kind of boilerplate that comes with like hooking up your own render function every time. And over the years, some of this got simplified out, but ultimately never really to the degree that then we saw with Pose, and which led directly into Framer Motion, which are the kind of crystallization. It's like I've almost been scorched by doing something that was so low level that I wanted to then create something that made things accessible. Like it's not good enough for things to be possible. it has to be cheap in terms of time for people to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to get done.
And in terms of animation libraries, it's very easy for the API just kind of like be too much for a user. Like even like I've grown accustomed to framer motion. When I first initially tried to start using it, it was like so many new concepts. So if like you're at a lower level, I can imagine it being even harder.
Yeah, and that always surprises me as well. And it's like, and I'd love to take another run at this because like it is a lot of concepts. And the problem with frame motion or motion now, especially motion for React, I mean, motion for so now there's a vanilla side and a React side. And the problem with the React side, I would say, is that there are these concepts, but the problem, I guess, with writing a simple API is that then you always reach your limit of of its possibilities. Then you want to introduce something where, okay, well, if you do it like this, then you unlock all these features. If you do it like this, then you unlock all these other features. So there's a couple of like steps like that, I think, with frame motion, where to actually get a lot out of it, you only need a few props. So initial animate, while hover, things like that. While in view is probably my favorite because it's like the superpower that I wish all elements had. And that's really all you need, I'd say, to make most things. But then, if you want to get into like complex orchestration, you talk about timelines or variants. If you then get into, you can do all sorts of things with motion values, which is like a power user feature. But like, how do you introduce that in a way that it doesn't make people feel like they have to know it or that they're scared of it? Like, it doesn't matter. No one needs motion values. Like 5% of the people need motion values, and those 5%, the stuff they do with it is incredible. So yeah, I haven't figured out the messaging, and that's something I'd like to take a run at again now that the docs are mine, and it's more in my taking it motion independent. It's now more my interests are aligned with making this as like easy to use as possible.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So you had created Pop Motion. It was like over 6 years ago?
Yeah, it's around that. Yeah, I think it came out a little less, but I definitely joined Framer 6 years ago, and I made Pose not long before that, and it kind of carried straight through.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you'd made Pop Motion, or at least started it, and then you joined Framer. And maybe it's worth like talking a little bit about like what Framer the company is and what they do. Yeah. Well, let's just start there. So what is Framer for those people who might not have heard it?
Okay, what is Framer? Framer is easily, and I say this from a completely unbiased perspective, but I can say it with this sort of conviction, of the type of person who's leaving in 3 days' time. So it's not like I'm not self-aggrandizing by saying this. No, it's for my money the best no-code website builder that exists because it acts like a design tool. It acts like Figma, and that's the language that I speak. Like I grew up using Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. So these are all concepts that I'm quite familiar with. I understand why Webflow would be familiar, like more of an easy process for certain, maybe a bit more technical-minded people. But I think the freeform canvas of Framer really gels with people. I think a lot of the confusion maybe about what Framer is that when I joined, it was a prototyping tool. Still with the same freeform canvas, but it was more about making designs that you could play with and you could give to a shareholder and say, this is what it's really going to feel like. And then when I came and made Framer Motion, it really was what it was going to feel like because it was using the real stuff that you could make the website in. But the problem with prototyping, this is probably going too deep, but it's kind of interesting. This is essentially how we ended up as a site builder, apart from having all the raw ingredients. But the addressable market for prototyping is kind of like a very specific niche. And I think the people, a bit like the Pop Motion API that I was telling you about, the people who love it, like they want a prototype and they see it as a key part of their workflow. But if you imagine like the pipeline of design all the way to production, the one bit that you can ease it, the first bit that's going to go in like an economic downturn or even people that might just skip this step entirely is prototyping. Like it's a nice to have, but it's not really the thing that's you're not going to build a big business off it. But by making an amazing prototyping tool, inadvertently they'd made a amazing website builder tool, and the step it wasn't even a pivot. I'd say it was only a natural continuation of the tool's capabilities, but naturally, because partly because it was so successful now, that sort of the prototyping stuff has just sort of fallen away. And I think that's been quite a natural process from my point of view. But I understand why people still have this confusion, like, oh, it's a prototyping tool, but it is a site stuff, or was it a Figma competitor, or what was this? It's a website building tool, and it's very. I use it for motion.dev. I'm a big fan. Probably, I call myself a super fan at this point. Whereas for the first few years, there was almost a meme within the company that, like, Matt doesn't know what Framer is. He doesn't know how to use it, because I was so concentrated on Framer Motion. Whereas now I think I know it better than a lot of people at Framer. Like, I use it a lot, and I'm a big fan.
So when it was a prototyping tool, were like the animations built in a way that just like wouldn't work on normal websites, and that's kind of where your libraries came in and made it production ready from the animation point of view?
Yeah, so they had the problem. So what they had before I joined, they had it was almost like a code sandbox environment where you had a CoffeeScript API, and you work directly with the DOM. So they could consider it quite technical. So as they moved into like a more of a GUI situation, they also ported it to React. And with that, they didn't really have like an easy to use API, and the animations weren't in the UI at that point. So when I joined, like the idea was to make an animation library that was simple enough that you can just say, like, a designer will understand, like, the animate prop. That was the cornerstone, really, of the whole API at the time. And like, to make it draggable, you type drag. Like, these sorts of concepts, they were just meant to be like absolutely like no argument, simple. Whether or not we succeeded, I don't know. But that was the goal. And then the production story, it was just kind of nice. It was just great that it came out of it. Like, especially when we made layout animations and Magic Motion, like you couldn't hand off a lot of the design, the animations that people were making to a developer, because it would take like months and months of engineering work, literally, to make some of these animations. And you sprinkled all that throughout your app, or you can just use Framer Motion with the layout prop. And you can recreate these things straight in. And now, of course, Framer has like the UI around all of the animations and stuff. So even their focus on the API itself is sort of disappeared, which made it a natural situation, given that Framer's getting really successful. They're a big user of it, but likewise, Motion is not bigger in terms of like user. Well, I mean, it might be. I literally don't know numbers, but like it's bigger in terms of like, it exists within Framer, but it also serves like a certain percentage of the web. And to really serve everyone, that's why it sort of made mutual sense for myself and Framer to part ways. Obviously, they're the big sponsor of Motion, and I still work with them closely. But yeah, I think that's how the exit came about, the enter and the exit. I think I've gone full circle there.
We'd like to stop and thank our sponsor for the week, Mux. If you've ever tried to integrate video into your product, you know that it's no easy feat. And if you're building something complex that needs uploads, hosting, and playback, it gets even harder. So that's where Mux comes in. Mux is an all-in-one platform for helping you get video into your product and make it not a hassle at all. This week, I actually used Mux. They have that open source project called player.style. It's a very easy to drop in component that will help you render a video player, like with a bunch of different themes. They have Halloween themes, they have YouTube themes, Vimeo themes. You can make your video player look however you want and not really even have to do anything at all. All I had to do was install a React package, wrap it around the video element, and then I'm off to the races. I didn't even use Mux's platform. That's how good of a tool it is. But if you want to discover how good of a tool Mux is for the entire video pipeline, I highly suggest you go over to mux.com to check them out. And with that, let's get back to the episode. So let's like kind of dig more into the library itself now. So I think many people try to add animations to their apps, and there's like so many pits of failure in there. The biggest one being that some properties are GPU accelerated, some aren't. Like, most developers don't even know that, which is kind of mind-boggling for web developers. But how does Framer Motion enable you to do things that those APIs don't? Because a lot of those APIs, you can get pretty nice animations out of them, but I feel like you eventually hit a wall.
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is that Framer Motion's like the only animation library that I'm aware of that has like a hybrid engine where if a property can be animated via the GPU, it will be. Like we use WAPI for that one. So it always tries to do the most performant thing possible. Same with scroll timeline. If the options that you've given it are possible to run on scroll timeline, then it will do. And that's for both WAPI animations, JavaScript animations, but also if you provide it a function, it will run on scroll timeline and not be polling the scroll position. Because the polling the scroll position is like a DOM read. Again, something that you're right, like people shouldn't have to care about that. But if you use it as scroll timeline, and so it's not always there, but basically it kicks in anytime it can optimize these things, it will. And anytime that the user's requested capabilities beyond what it will de-optimize down to the JavaScript engine, essentially. And one thing that I've sort of been toying with, I don't know if I'll do it, but it'd be nice to have like a strict mode of some sort. Like we have a strict mode of, I've forgotten, but for a different context, but a strict mode where it's like, if this isn't going to run on the GPU, don't do it. Like you could imagine starting doing things like that. And that would be relatively simple. If that's something that people want, like tell me, because like that would be relatively simple to set up the way it all is at the moment. So yeah, I feel like that might have answered your question.
Yeah. I was reading through the docs and like it does point that out a few times. Like when you're animating a box shadow, it's like, oh, maybe you want to use a filter instead. What jumped out to me is like there needs to be an ESLint rule right here. Currently at my company, I wrote one internally that if you use any of those 28 things that like trigger a reflow, you'll get some yellow squigglies under it. That'd be very cool to see from Framer or from Motion.
Yeah, thanks. No, that's not. I really love that idea because I mean, it could happen at runtime. It could happen as ESLint. I really delved into writing my own ESLint rules, but that might be interesting as well. It's funny because like it's hard to go. So this is my problem with going hard and fast on rules. So like layout, obviously never animate layout. Actually, layout, it's not always that expensive. So for instance, if you've got like a box that's isolated from the rest of the page with an isolation rule on CSS isolation rule, doesn't have that many children, you can animate width and height. It's probably fine. Like on most of it, the 99% of users aren't going to notice this. If you're animating the width and height of a whole page that has like multiple nested flex boxes and grids, obviously it's a bad idea. Same with certain properties. Like for instance, one of the reasons why animating box shadow is not good is because it triggers paint, whereas you can animate filter and it runs completely hardware accelerated, which is amazing. But there's situations where like this is very specific, but I've been trying to figure out how to like do automatic wheel change in a way that like works. I had to take it out in the end because sometimes, especially when you've got a design tool like Framer, but this happens to developers as well. If you've like got a huge layer that's just massive, you don't want to be reading the size of every layer and saying, this one's too big. So if you apply wheel change to that and it becomes a GPU layer and you're on an iPhone, the browser will crash. But say you're animating transform, I put in this heuristic where it actually turned out I did know the size of this element. So I put in a heuristic that was basically like, if it's bigger, if the surface area of this is bigger than arbitrary threshold, then use the JavaScript animations instead. Don't apply wheel change. Don't animate it on WAPI. Do it just via style. And all you're doing is changing the translate X of this element, this huge element. And I thought, job done. And I tested it, and the frame rate was obviously worse because now we're painting the element as a change, but that wasn't what was causing the slowdown at all. Like if you look into it, the style recalculations that this was triggering were the cause of the slowdown, like 95% of the time with these style recalculations. But I still haven't really got to the bottom of why changing the style of a style attribute could have this cascading effect. especially when there wasn't any rules like CSS like style equals this, which could obviously be very dangerous. So I haven't really figured out what it was, but then I discovered that if you animate a CSS variable using WAPI, and you register it via CSS register property, which is an upcoming API, and you say isolate true, then no other style recalculations get triggered. So what we've done there is purposefully de-optimize an animation off of the GPU, and then kind of purposely opted it in. So we're opting it into Paint now, but by then booting it back up onto WAPI via a CSS variable, we're cutting out the style recalculations. And there's all these little tricks that wouldn't be the advisable thing to do most of the time. I actually think most of the time, if you're going to animate it like that, animate just to translate X via the style attribute. Like I think if you weren't hitting those style recalculations, it would be faster in most situations. But in this situation, it was faster to do it the other way, because you can still add in other situations that will change animate by JavaScript. Anyway, that's a really long example of saying it's so hard to like paint with such broad brushstrokes, like these rules basically. So I always worry basically about doing linting. Also, there's always best practices, but I've gotten into so many situations where someone's like, this is the best way to do it, and you're basically wrong for not doing it like this. And I'm like, well, possibly, but the time when it's not wrong, it's the time when it's going to crash the browser, or it's like, so you get into these conversations. And yeah, so it may be a lint rule, but it would be an advisory. It'd be a warning, not an error.
Yeah, definitely. Errors say a lot more than a warning does. You got to have really good documentation on those warnings, though.
Yeah.
I think this speaks to like why libraries like this are so important, because we're talking about like a lot of really complex properties that you just kind of have to know. It's like, oh, this property performs this way, this property performs this way, and you're giving this nice API to sort of like basically compile down to or run these properties in this way. And before libraries like Motion, and I guess after Flash, we really didn't have anything. We were kind of like in this like dead zone of like, it's just really hard to do animations performantly. So at least it's nice to see the browsers improve.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like intersection observer is like a massive one in terms of like scroll triggering animation, having to poll the scroll every frame, or set up an event or something. And then you have like CSS properties like transform, for example, which would you should never have to know anything about this. So it's funny when you run into these things. In every browser, it used to be that if you animated like transform X 100 pixels, that would be accelerated. But if you animated 100%, that wouldn't be accelerated, because that relied on knowledge of the size of the element. And that was actually one of the ways I was trying to get it with this previous example. I was trying to get it like off the GPU, but still use WAPI. And I was trying to do things like, a calc. It was like a no-up calc, wrap 100 pixels in a no-up calc, just to see if the calc like triggered the de-optimization or something. Couldn't really find anything, but that's Chrome these days. Like maybe it's pretty broad support in that sense. But on Safari, WAPI is driven by, or hardware animations, accelerated animations are driven by core animation, I believe is what it's called. It's like the OS level animation API or something. But there's a bunch of things that the spec supports, like playback rate, that core animation doesn't let you change the playback rate. So if you then take an animation and change its playback rate to like 1.00000001, so essentially one, but very slightly different, that will de-optimize the animation off of hardware accelerations in Safari. And I used that sort of thing when I was developing Motion 1. I ran into all these bugs, and that was kind of meant to be like the jQuery of WAPI in a sense. So I'd have an option like you can allow WebKit acceleration in Safari, or allow WebKit acceleration. It defaulted to false because there were so many bugs that I was running into. Luckily, most of those have gone away now. That it would have this little snippet that was like playback rate equals 1.00. But you do these things, you'd never notice or run into them. I think a lot of performance worries are kind of, I wouldn't say overblown. I just I think that definitely you need to profile and you need to test on different devices. I think that always comes down to that.
Cool. So you've mentioned it a few times now, but you had this third project that came out, I think, a year or two ago when the web animation API started to gain traction, what you've been calling WAPI. So when I saw that come out, I was like, oh, we there is no more Framer Motion anymore. We can just use the browser. But that didn't seem to quite be the case. So what was the goal with Motion One?
Yeah, Motion One was like an experiment essentially. So both of the times I've ended up writing these animation libraries, I wanted to write a book. So it started with Pop Motion. I was trying to write a book about UI animation, and I ended up just writing the library. Likewise with Motion One, I think I wanted to write about browser APIs and stuff. And I was kind of poking my head into, I'd kind of written them off because I seem to remember feeling like WAPI had all these hard edges and rough sides to it. So I never really poked my head into it much. And then at one point I was like, it would be cool to be able to fire off these hardware accelerated animations from, but then I'd be like, but it doesn't support springs. So what's the point? Blah, blah. And I'd sort of lead myself into that mental space. So I started checking it out, and I started by calling it like Motion Concept C. And that was like my third. So I had the imperative JavaScript library, the declarative pose and frame of motion. And this is like my new concept where it was like a hybrid, like not even a hybrid at the time. When I first started, it was just like, how much can we get out of WAPI for the minimum amount of file size? So things like just even simple things like default values. Like if I say width : 200, that should animate 200 pixels because everyone knows that the default value of width is 200 pixels, like is pixels. It's not. There isn't a default unit value. So you have to say to WAPI 200 pixel string. It just feels, little things like that really bug me. The fact that you can't interrupt an animation, and the fact that you can't really stop one nicely. So you've got to wrap all these things. It doesn't accept easing functions. So now it dynamically generates linear CSS easing functions on the fly. Same as Spring. If the browser supports it will use the linear easing, and if it doesn't, it will pre-generate keyframes. So it does a bunch of stuff under the hood. And now we're at a point where so that was Motion One. It was a side project, and at the time, I was kind of like working 16 hours a day. I didn't have a kid at that point, so it was the sort of thing that you could do. But I'd go home and I'd work on this side project. And at one point, I got really blazed and drank a lot of whiskey, and I just realized I'm kind of wasting my time. Like I should be having more fun. Like I was until recently. Like in my free time, like work should be work. And so from then on, I didn't really touch it for a while. But over time, because obviously Frame Motion was my day job, a lot of these innovations would creep their way into Frame Motion. So you ended up with the hybrid engine where you kept the JavaScript engine, but just for a couple of kilobytes, you also had this fast path when you could get it. Now it's got like a mini version of the animate function, which is just like 2.5 kilobytes. The in view and all the scroll animations that all came out of Motion One. And then they got improved in Frame of Motion, but never really made it back to Motion One. So that's why with Motion now, I'm sort of launching the JavaScript API, the vanilla API, and it's now got all of those innovations that made it to Frame of Motion, but never made it to Motion One. But yeah, that's basically what it was. It was an experiment that went too far, and I really enjoyed making it, but I just don't think it was a healthy. Like it. I'm not getting any younger. I don't need to do that.
That'll be interesting to dig into in our next topic because it does sound like you're going to go hard mode here. But before that, taking a library like Framer Motion, which is like mostly React centric, and you talked about doing a lot of more sort of vanilla stuff in Motion One, and then rolling this all up together to release a library that will be not just React centric, have a good first class React experience, but like be more general usable. That's a really hard design problem because like how you think about animations in React is very different than how you think about animations in a lot of other frameworks and stuff. So how are you, like what challenges have you faced, and like how are you making these paradigms work together?
I luckily I don't want to say I essentially it almost sounds Machiavellian. I didn't plan for this in the sense that I knew this was going to happen, but I wrote everything with the consideration that at some point this might be broken out into internals. So everything in frame of motion was kind of already not, it wasn't tied to, it was abstracted from React as far as possible. So most things, not everything, not enough, but a lot of things have like, are encapsulated away from React. I think it'd be easy because like, and it's happened like naturally a bit because when I launched Frame of Motion 3D for React 3 Fiber, that required certain abstractions. Likewise, the fact that you can lazy load all of the animation functionality, that required certain abstractions. And likewise, the history of it incorporating pop motion originally as an external dependency, but then later with Motion One as an external dependency, and having all of that folded back in at some point, the architecture just lended itself. So when I wanted to do certain things, like release certain things as a framework agnostic API, it was really about exposing them in a way that, and actually most of the hard bit was just making sure that React wasn't included in the final bundle. Like that was actually like, and it will always be types. Like I've imported a type that imports a type from React, and I'm still like in the process of unpicking all that a little bit, and I haven't really I've been independent now for 6 working days, so I should give myself a break. But I sort of feel a bit bad that I've gone so hard on the business side of things, and I haven't really taken. What I was excited about was like getting to the library and doing all of that. And so there's certain things that I need to tidy up essentially, and like make sure that the DOM stuff lives over here, the React stuff lives in here, and they'll never, and they're all ordered in the right way and encapsulated. Like Motion One used to be really good at this. Like everything had its own package. I don't want to go too far into that again, but at least separate the DOM stuff, JavaScript stuff, and React stuff. Like have the renderers split to some sensible level. And I want to do it in a way that you can like just install Motion, and then everything beyond that. So like if you want frame Motion for React, then you just it's Motion / React. And I when I start mixing frameworks, that's going to be an interesting problem to solve. But I just like the aesthetics of it, which sounds shallow, but I actually think it changes. Like even the motion, like you don't want a scoped package. That I really feel like that's just a bias, but I feel like the aesthetics of importing from a scope package and things like that, they don't sit right with me. So I'm going to put an inordinate amount of work into making sure that you can just import everything from a sub entry point.
That's going to be quite the challenge when it comes to types. I was thinking when you were talking like, oh yeah, you just have 2 packages, but like optional peer dependencies for all the different frameworks. Oof, it's going to be a rough one.
Yeah, and it might be even impossible. I don't know yet, but that's the sort of thing that I'll at least give it a shot, because I really value it and want that in my own usage day to day.
Yeah, you've done a good job with the API. I was flipping through the docs today in the vanilla version, and I was like, oh, this looks just like I would expect it to. A lot of the times when I see a vanilla API for some JavaScript library I use in React, the vanilla API is like daunting, but this was like nice and approachable.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And it's nice that, so I haven't moved. There's certain things that I want to bring into the vanilla that will probably make it feel a little more daunting, like motion values. There's no reason why they live in React land. Likewise, a few things like gesture handlers, like it's nice that there's only a few exports. I think that's also what makes it feel approachable. But like for instance, I want to write this would be a quick one, but we've got the hover gesture, which sounds like easy, like mouse. So surely it's just a mouse over, but it does certain like pointer filtering and a few other things. And there's a certain pattern I want all of these things to adhere to. And it'd be nice to rewrite like just that one and have that as a hover. So the menu will fill out and it will look a bit more robust. But hopefully the functions themselves will always feel simple and intuitive to use. That's what I'm going for, at least. Yeah. And then I get to dog food it in the React version. That's the other nice thing. When I rewrite these things, I give it to the JavaScript API, but before that gets published, I'm going to rewrite how it's implemented in React using this API. And if I hit any, boundaries or something, then that gives me a chance to make sure they're fixed, essentially.
Nice. Let's transition a little bit and talk about your departure from Framer. So you were gainfully employed at Framer for 6-ish years, working mostly on what was Framer Motion, what is now Motion. And I always find these sort of like independent movements really interesting. The indie hacker folks were purchased by Stripe and then rolled out of Stripe again recently. And I always like find the like how the like ergonomics of this work. So what was the conversation like of like taking Framer independent, and now that you're building a business on it, how do you think about like the differences of how you're working while you're at Framer versus like how you're working going forward?
So I think, I suppose there's a few, so over the years, it had come up. I always wanted Motion. I knowing it or feeling like it had been successful, but free. I was always pushing for like how I didn't want it seen as like a second rate part of Framer, I guess. And so I was always pushing for like, we could monetize it like this, we could monetize it like that. And there was never any interest, and rightfully. So like, because the addressable market for what Frame is trying to do is so different to what I was suggesting. Like what I'm suggesting is this is a nice, like imagine if you made this on this, and it's like, yeah, imagine like that's nice for one person, but it's not nice for a whole team of people. So, and likewise over the years, I'd been essentially running Frame Motion to the best of my abilities as a personal fiefdom. Like I wanted this to be like just me. And I kind of always valued the periods where I got to do what I want. There was periods as well where I'd work closer with the team. There's all sorts of, it's worked in loads of different ways over the years, and some work better than others. And like the way my brain works, I kind of need to let it loose in terms of I think I've learned over the years, like if I try and force my brain into concentrating on something that it's not really that interested in, then I'm going to get stuck. So at the moment, I'm trying to play on my sense of momentum in terms of like, if I'm interested in this right now, I just have to do, that's what I have to do. And that way you kind of keep moving and you don't feel resentful in a sense of like, but I've got to do this boring thing. If you wait long enough, the boring thing actually becomes interesting. So I always feel like, I can't get to everything right now. So I might as well get to the things that I'm interested in. And then like later down the line, I'm going to be interested in those other things because I care about them all. So essentially like that, having that sort of brain inside a company, which now like, especially once it hits success, like it was harder, I suppose, to align the interests of Motion with the interests of Framer, which I'm quite concerned about doing as well, because I'm like a big fan of Framer. And I like working. I love working there. Like I love, it's a phenomenal company. But above that, I always wondered what was best for Motion, and knowing that yes, like Frame is a massive consumer of it, but so is the rest of the web. Like, so how do I service both audiences to the best of my abilities? That's kind of how and the conversation started by it was actually it's not like I'd never thought about it before, but when it was suggested, I knew immediately like. It was just a passing thought, but I was like, boom, like, let's get a plan. Let's present it to the company. And they've been amazing in seeing it. I think they understand as well, because like it's a mutually beneficial situation. At the moment, if you type in like Framer animations, obviously Framer Motions documentation comes up. This is a no-code site builder tool. They don't need that. Like they just don't need it. So it's now, over time, it's going to be the situation where you type in Framer animations, you get their documentation, as you should. When you type in Motion animations, you get my documentation. And so it's a lot cleaner in that sense. And I think there was brand confusion around what the two different things were. And especially that since it became not a prototyping tool, but like to take something to production in Framer now, like you just have to press the publish button. Like it couldn't be simpler. Why have an API? And so when you start feeling like, if this was built today, we wouldn't have made it an open source animation library. I don't know. It sort of spoke to me, like just that thought. And so, yeah, I think we naturally arrived at this conclusion. And like I say, they're the first and biggest sponsor, so they couldn't have been more supportive, really. And likewise, it's going to continue powering the animations for all Framework websites. for a while.
So when you break off and make your own company, though, there's a lot of things you got to think about. One of those being how you're going to fund it. Framer being the first sponsor is great, but do you have plans for other things? Is it just going to be sponsorships? I saw like a big mention of courses on the page. Do you plan on releasing a course?
I'm not personally going to do a course because to do it, like, so my problem is I want to do everything very well. And I know people who make courses very well. So I'm just going to forward people to their courses. I'm never going to do it better than these educators. Like, it's just not going to happen. Or if I did, it's not to say it's beyond my, I feel like with enough time, maybe I could do something like that. But because they put so much time and care into these things, that's how much time and care I'd have to put into it, if not more, more time, because these are professional guys. I think my problem is that would come at the detriment to the core product. So the monetization strategy, if I can call it a strategy, it sounds a bit grandiose, but really it's a Notion document with a few bullet points on it. But the idea is yes, corporate sponsors are a big part of it. I feel like there's a lot of companies out there that use Motion, and their homepage is getting awards because they're using these wild animations. And they're super fans. So I feel like there's a lot of these companies are, and I've already got some like Linear, and is the host of it. I got actually Tailwind was the second sponsor. Tailwind extensive users, and there's a few more in the pipeline as well. Already, I would consider it getting towards, because I'm a bit concerned about churn as well. But I'd say we're getting towards very sustainable already, which is nice. But again, because I'm concerned about churn, I still want to push that a little bit, because there's more. You start to get into the realms of there's more I could do here. Like, what if I could get someone a contract to do this or that? Where it's something that I don't excel in, or what someone can make a CLI for installing local components or something. They'll do it faster than me and better. Can I get little contracts for these things together from the sponsorships? I don't know, but that's one side of it. Then the other side is personal sponsorships. I don't think are going to really fly. So it's actually today, as of the record, that I launched Motion Plus, which is it's in lieu of personal sponsorships. And that Motion Plus is going to be a one-time fee of say it'll be 300 quid basically by the time this comes out. At the start, I think if you're buying it, you're basically supporting Motion. There's not many things that I'm able to give you because I'm just starting out. You get access to our private Discord where you'll get support and you get to meet other super users. You get a free wallpaper pack, which is probably the lower of the value offerings, but I use the wallpaper and I quite like it. And there's also, so the first thing that I'm doing is gating content. So every time that I come out of a new guide, I'll time gate it. I don't want to gate it forever because I want to build up a robust, for everyone, but they're going to come out time gated for roughly a month. This first one is a Vue integration guide. And that is going to be gated for 40 days because of Christmas. But I'm not going to unlock it until after Christmas because I'll be full. And I don't want to do it. No one care anyway if I did it. So I'm just going to keep on rolling these out. So at any given time, there should be a certain number of things that are time logs. But then over time, that will just build the content. So it gives me an incentive. This is what I'm trying to do, align my incentives with the betterment of the product. So I'll building up this library of content that eventually everyone can use for free. People who really want to support the project and need this content, they'll get to pay for it. But you know what I'm saying. And then on top of that, I want to build up a library of permanently gated premium components that are much higher level APIs, like a custom cursor, these sorts of things, or a ticker or a particle system, these sorts of things that are built on the foundations of Motion. They'll have what I would I'll be thinking a lot about the API for these ones. And then the last thing is I want to build up a library of, we've got some examples, but they're kind of they're very bare bones. This is how would you use it. I'd like to spend some time building a catalog of curated, beautiful examples, perhaps like as a private GitHub repo that you can download and use locally, or maybe you go onto a page and it's locked until you are a Motion 1. But yeah, so, and this is all content that basically wouldn't exist if I didn't go independent. Like there was no reason for me to ever build this at Framer because it would take away from my other responsibilities essentially. So again, it's the alignment of my, my incentives to be able to keep it sustainable by making it better. That's the trick that I'm trying to attempt, I guess.
Yeah, I could imagine like a shad CN like CLI where you like pop in like really complex animation like templates into a project and give the user a nice jumping off point.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. I was looking at the way that you can install their components, and I thought that's actually exactly what I want, but I don't really know where to start. The end. I don't really know. No, I tell you what, no, but I do have the custom cursor component almost ready, and it's super nice. It's like the Mac OS, the iPad cursor, where it's like a ball. And then if you go over selectable text, it will like warp to match the size of the text. But likewise, you don't need to use that bit. You can like have custom content in there, or you can have things follow the cursor, and that's almost good to go. I actually have a component almost ready to ship, which is a custom cursor, and that can do things like it's a bit of an tablet style, an iPad style cursor where it will like if you've got selectable text, like it will warp to match the font size, and you can put in custom content, and I want all these to work together with each other. So it's a start. But what I'm hoping is that, of course, today it probably be only like diehard users that use it, but I want to be in a position in a year's time where if you just want to use, like there's so much there, so much value represented by that membership that you want, it seems like a no-brainer not to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard domain, and even with a powerful tool, I think like it's still hard. So there's like a lot of value to be added to the space. So I definitely think, especially if you're able to keep it small, then yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of success in your future. There's something really appealing about this sort of like kind of lifestyle like business that's like behind a passion project that's like providing value. Obviously it turns into a whole different thing if you start raising venture capital and like trying to turn it into like a really scalable business. That's a different beast entirely. But I mean, I imagine there are a lot of really interesting opportunities for you ahead.
I hope so. I think that, I want to keep it that way. And I'm quite keen to avoid taking on any venture capital, because that's not the sort of life that I want to lead. Like I did always work best, like when I can concentrate on something and really go for it. I think that's how I operate best. And I'm not really looking for becoming like a business creator in the sense that I don't want the stuff that comes with the business. And I'm not really looking for like some ridiculous, like I'm not looking for my empire. I'm just looking for like a way to work that is compatible with the way I think. That's basically what I'm after here. So I feel like because that's a reasonable goal, it should be reasonable to achieve. And whether or not it is, I don't know. But that's what I'm after.
When we're wrapping up the episode, we always like to ask someone a forward-facing question. And I think your history, specifically where it lands out in the web development cycle, is like kind of interesting. So we had, as you talked about in the very beginning, we had Flash, and we had, these very heavy but very rich animation experiences. And then, Flash got killed, essentially. Apple, especially, being like, all right, we're not supporting this on our devices. And that like changed the landscape, and we had a lot less animation and a lot harder to do. And so, you saw this opportunity to come in and build some libraries, and you've been working on it all these years. Browsers have been getting better and giving more features and making it more performant, like opening up more possibilities. So when you're looking ahead to the next like 5 years, what do you think are going to be the biggest things that are going to change in the space to make animations easier or faster or just like more capable? What is like the seismic shift, like Flash going away, that you think could be on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm hoping that more visual editors exist, or like It's hard to say really, because first of all, I think no code tools like Framer are basically it. I think in terms of UI animations, we've gotten to a stage that's a bit like the visual design, where back in the day, like I started out making a Zelda fan site, and it was I spent a lot of time in Photoshop making everything like this bit looks like leather, this bit looks like burnt parchment, and everything's like all the text has like a tiny little drop shadow. You can imagine it was like back in the day of like Web 2.0, but I was trying to do like the Zelda version where it's like parchment and tactile. So and then obviously now we're in this super minimal world where the visual design's a bit more about clarity and visual, like, yeah, but essentially about clarity. And I think motion design's also a bit in that same world. And so I do think that the whole world, the time of complicated timeline-based animations, we're talking about very niche sort of implementations for them. So when you open up Framer and you add a hover effect, really all you're doing is you're changing a few values, and it's a simple A to B animation, and you can change the the spring and feel of it visually. And I honestly think that is going to be like 90% of, because if I make a similar thing, I like a few years ago I made motion dev tools, and the timeline felt a little overkill. I don't know what that does. That come out in the record? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll stop gesticulating in case any little bubbles don't want to pop. What was I even saying? Yeah, I think that the timeline is it feels overkill for the majority of what people are doing. Although I do think it's a nice visualization when you stagger in and stuff like that. But I think for the most part, that's not what people are doing. I think it's very simple. So the accessibility in that sense, basically what I'm saying is I don't think we're going to end up in this sort of maximalist design trend of like burnt textures. And I could be wrong, because it's like a pendulum, isn't it? But there's something about this, it's stuck for so long that I sort of feel like this is where we're here for. So physically based animations are like going to be more and more, like, especially with the linear easing curve and CSS. But again, that's an incremental thing. And so I can't honestly tell you, like AR glasses, like with the Vision Pro, like I was having a conversation earlier today where the other person was talking about, like, I've not used it, but the tactile feeling of like looking at something and like, clicking your fingers and stuff. Yes, I think things like that are going to happen, but when? Like, I feel like the AR stuff is just not here, like, and it won't be for a good while. So it's not. I'm not trying to say this like I think we're in a rut. I think it's amazing. Like, I think things are just going to get easier, and animations are subtler, which is nice. I think there might be more of them, like, and that because they're easy to perform, and that's nice, and for them to feel like using more spring animations, for instance, like that's kind of where I want to see it go. I think things like, I think you see a lot of animations where Apple are always very tasteful with doing things. This is exactly what I'm sort of saying. Like, they have animations everywhere, but they're kind of always subtle and they always feel nice. They're rarely shit, and that, I think, is where we're heading. Like, essentially in terms of animation, I don't see, but maybe that's a lack of imagination.
Yeah, a tasteful future for animations for all. It's definitely a fine line you have to walk with designing animations and design in general, of doing too much before you pull it back and do just enough. But that wraps it up for our question.
So that's sort of exactly what I'm saying. Like, it's almost like as a society, we went too far, Flash. As much as I love using it, but now it's been pulled back. It's like, you do it personally. Like, every artist sort of has that journey of like, they go too far, they pull it back. I think the mega trend of design is a bit is similar, basically.
Cool. Well, that wraps it up for our questions this week on this episode. Thanks for coming on. This was a really fun jaunt into all things animation. It's a pit of failure, and motion makes it a pit of success. So thank you for coming on and talking about it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Like, I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, thanks.